Greetings, everyone. It's Katira Poland. I am the CEO of Love for Words and the hostess of Editor Knows Best podcast here on Anchor. Anchor is a free platform. You have access to tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. You can also distribute Anchor will distribute the podcast for you through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other channels. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And lastly, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Make sure you download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Editor Knows Best. My name is Katira Poland. I am the creator and hostess of the podcast, which is for authors and writers looking for more information about the publishing process, writing, editing, all things really the literary world. So thanks for tuning in. It airs every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and some other channels. Today, we do have a very special guest. He is the editor of the Daily Record and the Rochester Business Journal. He's been in that role for 4 years, but he recently transitioned to the associate publisher of both of those publications. He is a 2002 graduate of the University of Rochester, and he spent 20 years in various writing and editing roles in the journalism industry. He's spearheading collaborative team efforts with the RBJ and the Daily Record, launched new initiatives, including events and custom products, to a new webinar series and Rochester Biz Conversations, which often partners with community leaders. He's an avid runner and rock climbing enthusiast who cherishes family time with his wife, Trinity, and their 4 children. And he is a city resident and is bullish on Rochester's future. He is looking forward to moving through the pandemic and will continue to experiment with new offerings to meet the needs of local businesses and the legal community for the Daily Record and Rochester Business Journal. Today's guest is Ben Jacobs. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, thanks so much. Thanks so much. And just to give a background to our audience, Ben and I recorded previously, but we didn't really record. So we're taking another stab at it, and this time we'll get it right. So thanks again, Ben, for your patience and being willing to re-record. So as you know, we have primarily authors and writers who are in the audience. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your background and what led you into journalism.
Sure. So like you said, I went to the University of Rochester, and I initially didn't go there with any intention of being a writer or an editor. I was originally going to major in math, and changed my mind partway through college and decided to do something different and ended up going to journalism. And UR doesn't really have a full journalism program, so I just took the courses they had and was fortunate to get a part-time job while I was there at the Democrat and Chronicle working in the sports department. So I was able to do a little bit of writing here and there as part of that. You know, it was what you'd expect a part-time college job to be, answering a lot of phones, typing up stuff, things that aren't real exciting, but you know, during the high school playoff seasons, we would get to go cover sporting events. So it was a good way to get started. And then I moved on to being a full-time reporter in Ithaca, still covering sports. And then I moved to Tallahassee and did part sports reporting and part copy editing for a couple of years. And then came back to Rochester, went back to the Democrat and Chronicle as a copy editor, and then worked my way up to other editor roles and did that until 2016. That's when I moved over to the Daily Record and became editor there, and then shortly after became editor of the Rochester Business Journal as well. So
yes, and I know that you mentioned that your intention was to major in math, but then you pivoted. So what would you recommend to our listeners who are maybe feeling discouraged because the goal they had in mind, they've decided to change it?
So you can't be completely locked in on anything in life. I don't think. You always have to be ready for the possibility that your plans might change, what you're able to do might change, your circumstances might change, whether it's, what you're going to major in college, what you're going to do for a career, what your family life situation is going to be like. Change is inevitable, and if you're too locked in on something and you're not willing to even think about the possibility that might change at some point, it's going to make it harder for you if you do have to change. So just always be open to the idea that, whatever you're doing and whatever part of your life it is, it might not be forever, it might not be permanent, and you might need to try some new stuff at some point.
Yes, I definitely agree. Flexibility is important in really all aspects of life, especially your career, because you never know, what direction you'll go in. So thank you, Ben, for making myself and the audience feel better about that, because sometimes that can be discouraging, but it's a part of life. So I know that you said that you worked, in the sports industry and covering sports more so, and then you transition into Democrat and Chronicle. So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about Democrat and Chronicle? We have our audience, spans the globe, so they may not know what that is. And in addition to that, how covering sports, how you were able to transfer those skills to working with the Democrat and Chronicle.
Sure. So my transition from sports to other areas was kind of gradual. I, through my part-time job at the Democrat and Chronicle and then my job at Ithaca and in Tallahassee, I was really focused almost exclusively on sports. In Tallahassee, I started to do a little bit of editing of other types of stories. But really it was mostly on sports, and it wasn't even necessarily intentional that I shifted out of sports. The newspaper industry has changed a lot over the years, and for those who are listening who aren't familiar, the Democrat and Chronicle is the main daily newspaper in Rochester, and so most newspapers used to have a different copy desk. Like the copy desk is the copy editors and other types of editors who take the stories from the reporters and turn them into what you see in publication. And it used to be that each department, sports, features, business, news, would have a different copy desk. So there would be a sports copy desk and a news copy desk and a business copy desk. That's, for most publications, that's the thing of the past. Most publications don't have a different copy desk dedicated to each department. It's now, if you have a copy desk at all, it's one copy desk for the whole editorial department. So when I was in Tallahassee, it was still split. That was 15 years ago, showing how old I'm getting. But so Tallahassee did have a copy desk just for the sports section. And so that's what I worked on. I was primarily a sports copy editor. And then I also did some reporting on the Florida State baseball team and a couple other things as I had time. But I was really only working on sports. And then when I came back to Rochester, by that point, the Democrat and Chronicle had what is called a universal copy desk, which is that all the copy editors work on the entire paper. So I still read sports stories, I still edited sports content, but I also did news stories and business stories and feature stories. And, there was just the full mix of what a newspaper like the Democrat and Chronicle publishes. I was involved in all of it at that point. And so that kind of gave me exposure to a lot of different things, and got me more interested in news and politics and business. And that kind of led me down the path to where I was able to take over the roles that I have now.
That's awesome. Thank you for giving us that background. So I know that you mentioned you had focused on copy editing. And again, we have some in the audience who are looking to go into editing. So do you mind just giving them a summary of what the copy editing process looks like, or a summary of what it is?
Sure. So it's mostly checking stories for grammatical errors, style errors, spelling errors, factual errors, in any sort of inconsistencies, and making sure everything that's in the story is as accurate as it can be and is written the way it should be. Frequently, copy editors are expected to write the headlines for the stories as well. So that's a skill that a lot of copy editors have to develop. But it's really, you need to be really strong on grammar, spelling, style, and you need to have a really sharp eye for when there's something missing.
Right. For sure. Thanks for that background. And I agree. And for our audience, there are different types of editing. So that's why I wanted Ben to really, specify what copy editing is. So thank you for that background information, Ben. And for those in the audience who are interested in pursuing editing, are there any resources or courses or anything that you have used that's been helpful in defining your craft or helping you become a better editor?
Yeah, so I mean, the AP style book is something that I've throughout my career have referred to, and I still refer to it frequently. There are other style books. A lot of publications follow AP style. Some publications follow other styles. Some publications have their own in-house style. But the AP style book is pretty widely recognized and pretty widely used. So if you're looking to figure out how words should be used that can be confusing, that's a good place to start. Just getting a mentor who can, help you figure out like where you're strong and where you might not be so strong, and can help you improve on those things. I've had a number of mentors throughout my career who have given me tips and helped me to figure out how to do certain things a little bit better than I was doing them. So that personal engagement that you can get from a mentor-mentee relationship is really important.
Yes. I agree. Mentors are very important. So how did you go about finding your mentors?
It's mostly through just my career and through my where I was employed. I was fortunate to, when I started the DNC, have a number of people who were really strong editors and or writers who were interested in helping me develop as a writer and editor. And I talked to them a lot about the craft and learned from them, and listening to them and watching them do their work. So if you can work in a place that has other really talented people, that just being surrounded by people who are really good at something can help you get better at it as well, because you see how they do it and you learn from them.
Definitely. Yes, I agree. So for those of you who are, working either freelance, you can find other freelance editors or freelance writers to help you and mentor you. And again, they don't have to be in the same location. You can find virtual mentors. So there's so many resources. You can use LinkedIn. There's a lot of different, Facebook and social media groups where you can connect with each other. So I definitely recommend pursuing mentors informally and formally. It will definitely make you a better writer and a better editor, even a better reader. So I definitely recommend mentoring in some capacity for sure. So for you, Ben, what is your favorite and least favorite part of being an editor of a traditional publication?
So my favorite part is just how different it is, and how interesting the day always is. I'm never bored at my job. There's always something that I'm working on. There's always things that I'm trying to figure out, questions that I'm trying to answer, things that I'm planning. And it's there's some things that I do every day or most days, but even those things, it's not exactly the same way every day, and it's not the same stories every day, and it's there's just always something new that I'm encountering, and there's always something that I'm working on, and I'm never sitting at my computer at noon wishing that it would be 5 o'clock. Most of the time I'm sitting at my computer at 5 o'clock wishing it was still noon, so I had more time to get more work done.
Well, I'm excited to hear that. We know that unfortunately not everyone has that experience in their job, so I'm glad that I really enjoy that. So on the other side of the coin, what would you say is your least favorite part of being an editor?
So as much as I enjoy the fast-paced nature of it, it is a lot to keep track of. I get more emails than I know what to do with sometimes. So that's keeping up with emails is probably my least favorite thing. It's important, and I love the interaction that I have with people in the community, and I love getting emails and discussing options that people are emailing me about, story ideas, tips, things like that. But it also can really break up your concentration if you're trying to work on a story or work on planning something, and then you get an email, have to answer that, and then try to remember where you were in this other task. I know that I probably should take a class on how to manage email better throughout my day, but it is something that takes a lot of time, and figuring out how to get back to everybody on a timely basis without letting it completely derail the other things I have to do is something that I sometimes struggle with a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially now that mostly everything's virtual. So you can't walk down the hall to your colleague. So you have to utilize email, and that you get lots of emails. I'm sure you get plenty. So thank you for being transparent about that. So another question that I have is regarding actually the other side of editing, which is writing. Is that something that you have? Is that a hobby or something that you've ever, indulged in on a personal side?
I've never really done it on a personal side in terms of like just writing for myself or writing to try to write a book or write a story or anything. Pretty much all the writing I've done has either been for school or for a job, and I enjoy writing, and I don't do a lot of it anymore because I'm just so busy with everything else that's involved in my job. But I still do some here and there, and I enjoy it for the most part when I do it. But it's definitely not my top focus anymore. And maybe at some point down the road when I have a little less craziness going on in my life, I might think about writing for pleasure a little bit. But at this stage, it's just not something that's at the top of my priority list.
Right. I get it. Yeah, it definitely, it takes time and you have to be focused and dedicated. So I can understand that. So being an editor, I know that you know the importance of literacy and reading and writing, but what is your perspective on how we can improve that, especially with the youth, and get them to be more engaged in reading and writing and see the value in that. I know you have a family of your own, so if there are tips that you have on how you get your children to do more reading and writing, I would love to hear that.
That's a great question, and I don't know that I have any secret answers. I'm very fortunate that I have two daughters and I have two stepchildren, and my daughters, all of the kids really like to read. My daughters have just kind of always naturally read. My older daughter actually, if anything, reads too much, which sounds crazy, but she'll read while walking downstairs, and I keep worrying that she's going to miss a step and fall down the stairs. So I've just been really lucky that my kids have always had a real passion for reading, and I haven't really had to work to get them to open a book or to work on that. So I guess I'm just lucky in that regard, but I agree with you. Getting kids interested in reading at a young age is vital because you really develop a lot of your reading and comprehension skills when you're young, and if you're not exposed to reading, early on in life, it can be a lot harder to catch up later on.
Yes, for sure. And reading, is fundamental, literally. I mean, there's not much you can do in life without being able to read. And if you are illiterate or you struggle with reading, it does make life that much harder. I will say that for myself, I did, when I was young, I had the passion for reading and writing. So I used to participate in the Book It program, where you would read the books and get the free personal pan at Pizza Hut. And I was excited to find out they do still have that program. So I think initiatives like that really, motivate youth to read more, or even reading contests. I attended Nazareth Academy, so we had mandatory summer reading. But at that point, I had been doing the Book It program, since elementary school, so it didn't bother me. But I do think that, programs like Book It and other initiatives that schools have can be a way that we get, our youth more excited about reading and writing. And then I also was subscribed to Highlights Foundation magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with Highlights, but I remember reading that when I was younger, and doing the activities in the magazine. So I think that's another resource for those of you out there who may have children who struggle with reading or don't like reading. There are resources out there, and I recommend that you do a Google search and make sure that, the information that you are accessing is valid and it's accurate. But there are a lot of resources. So if you're looking, just those are two that I can think of off the top of my head. So
Yeah,
thanks, Ben, go ahead.
I would say that if you've got a kid who is really not eager to read and never makes an effort to read unless you're forcing them to,
Right.
Just there's so many different types of books and types of things that people can read. I would say don't get too focused on it has to be, this certain type of book.
Right.
It can be a graphic novel, it can be a choose your own adventure thing, it can be whatever. If you've got a kid who's not reading at all, anything that they're willing to read and be excited about reading is better than nothing. So if you can get them excited about reading a graphic novel, get them some graphic novels, and once they get used to that, then they might start getting interested in other things. But they're never going to start reading or reading a lot if they never find something that just sparks something that makes them want to pick up the book on their own.
Yes, and I agree with that. Nobody wants to be bored when they're reading. So I think some of it is maybe the books in the curriculum in schools isn't entertaining enough for the students, or not things that they're interested in. And then another component also is that if the students don't see themselves in their books, then they're typically disinterested. I remember being in elementary school and having books with characters that didn't look like me, which made me less inclined to read those books. I will say that I have seen a growth in that. I'm really excited about that we do have more books that are more reflective of the racial composition of our country, and also, embracing different cultures and things like that. So it's gotten better, but I remember being that student, like, well, where are the kids that look like me, or where are the adults that look like me? So I think that's another important thing we need to consider. And parents, you can take that in your own hands. You can buy your books for your own children. You don't have to only rely on the books from school. But that's just another observation that I made. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Ben? Or
I think it's important for people to see characters who they identify with in books, but it's also important, for people like my daughter who, she's a white girl, and there's plenty of books that have white girls in them, but it's important for her to also see characters who are not like her. I agree with you that it's gotten better. The book subjects have gotten more diverse in recent years, and she loves reading books about people from other cultures and other backgrounds. She always finds it really interesting, and so you're doing both. You're doing everybody a disservice if all the books have characters that look the same.
Yes.
The people who aren't like those characters don't see themselves, and the people who are like those characters never see anything else and don't know what else is out there.
Exactly. Thank you so much for bringing up that other that other component, because that is often overlooked. And people do have conversations, asking for characters that look like themselves, but we also tend to forget that it also has a negative impact um, on the larger society as a whole. Like you said, white people who are only reading about white people, that has a negative impact too. So thank you for bringing up that side of that perspective. I appreciate that. I'm always open to hearing other people's perspectives and opinions on that. So I really appreciated that, and that enlightened me. So I'll have to do some more research on that. So another thing that I enjoy doing. So I know that you have talked a little bit about copyright editing. Are there any types of other editing that you've done?
So, I mean, I started out as a copy editor. And then once I'd moved into, other editing roles, that, there's a variety of things editors do at newspapers. And I've pretty much done most of them at this point. So, we talked a little bit about what copy editors do, but, there's also editors who are involved in working with the reporters and planning out what the coverage is going to be. Editors who work with reporters to, once you've decided what a story is going to be about, some stories are important enough and big enough that you have kind of coverage meetings to talk about, all right, how are we going to tackle this topic? What are we going to focus on? Who are we going to talk to? How do we think we might structure it? When the reporters are working on a story early on in the process, the copy editors usually at the end of the story, once the story is pretty much done. But there are other editors who will read stories earlier on to maybe help structure better, to give some feedback on, if something's missing in the story, or, if you need to go get some more information about a certain thing. So that there's just a lot of different aspects to editing for a journalism publication. I've kind of played around in most of that stuff at this point.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Bennett mentioned, structural changes, and also, building out detail and giving more information, answering questions, making sure you're connecting with your target audience. So that's developmental editing. And that's what I do, but I edit for books. So again, we would ask the questions of, what does this mean if something is vague? If you have the same reveal in two places in your book, those are the types of things I would be looking for. If you use a word that maybe your audience won't know, I might ask you to define it. Or if you have a lot of words that are jargon, I might suggest that you have a glossary at the back of your book. So that's more of what I do, and I do that for books. So for audience members who might want a little bit more information about that, that's another type of editing that does exist. So Ben, so I really appreciated hearing about your background. Is there anything else, last words of encouragement, or anything you would like to share with our listeners who might be looking to become editors?
I would just say, whatever you're hoping to do in your career, in terms of writing or editing, just try to stick with it as much as you can. If you have a job in that field, try to learn as much as you can. If there's training opportunities that your company offers, take advantage of them. If you're trying to find a job and haven't found one, try to do freelancing until you can land a full-time job. Or you can always be just doing some writing or editing on your own, just to work on your skills until you're able to find something that is part of your career. But always be trying to work on your craft. You can't get better at something if you're just sitting around and not doing it. So you can't say I want to be an editor and then just wait until somebody gives you an editing job. If you don't have one already, you just need to keep doing things that will help you work on those language skills. And we talked about reading, but even for adults, read as much as you can. The more you can read good authors, good writers, good reporters, the more you'll learn about what good writing looks like and how to be a good writer yourself, or how to edit writers so that their work is the best it can be.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. So take initiative. That's what I gleaned from that. And don't wait around for, something to come to you. There are so many resources available. So you can make it happen yourself. So feel encouraged to do that. So Ben, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, either to learn more about a Rochester Business Journal, the Daily Record, or maybe about your background, if they have other questions for you, how can they reach out to you?
Sure. So as I said, I get a lot of email, but I'm happy to get more. So my email address is bjacobs@bridgetowermedia.com. And anybody can feel free to email me there, and I will get back as quickly as I can to any email I get.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your knowledge and information with myself and also the audience. Thank you all for tuning in to Editor Knows Best. Again, it airs every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a few other channels. Thanks again so much, everyone. Be safe and be well.
Thank you.
I'm Mache.
I'm Quintel. Ghost Readers. Well, we are a husband and wife dynamic duo whose sole purpose...
Why are you knocking on the door? I told you mommy and daddy were doing something.
Whose sole purpose is to allow the Black author to bring the voice in their head...
figure it out on your own.
Bring the voice in their head to life and add soul to their words.
I'm coming down there.
This is so unprofessional. You can find the show everywhere you get your podcasts. Ghost Readers Podcast.